Now, I've mentioned that what you really want to use Excel for, where you start seeing its power, is in using formulas. So I'm going to go over some formulas here. You've already used some. You've used the sum formula where you add up a column of numbers. But we're going to look at a few more that are going to be common, but they're very powerful. These are not all that you might need to use, but I'm going to also show you how you can find the formulas you need. So first, let's look over here at this section of the spreadsheet. We have a list of names and we have some scores here. Let's just imagine these are scores of some kind, whatever they might be. And so there's several things that we want to do, some statistical type of formulas. Okay. For example, we might want to find the average of these scores. So if I want to find the average, remember when you're going to do a formula, you type the equal sign. And average is pretty easy. That's just the word average. You notice as I start typing, it shows some things that are suggestions. So the average, then the parentheses, then I say which numbers do I want to average? Well, I just want to average those. So I just drag across them, put my closing parentheses, hit enter, and there is my average of those numbers. Put a column in there so we move that out of the way. Okay, now notice Excel is smart enough that when there's a blank cell, it doesn't even count that. Like the way you figure up an average is you add all the numbers together and then divide by how many numbers there are. Well, Excel notices that, okay, even though there's 20 names, there are 3 of them that are blank, so it's only averaging the 17 numbers together. So you don't have to worry about leaving out blank cells. Okay, now sometimes you might want to say, well, what's the largest number? Well, if you have 20 like this, it's pretty easy to find the largest number just by looking down through it. If you have a long list, it might be a bit more difficult. So there is a function for finding the largest number. And what we're going to do, I clicked on the cell where I want the answer to be. I'm going to say, okay, let me click my function thing there. And I want to find the largest number. And I typed that in here, and it comes up with some suggestions. Well, here's one that looks promising. Large, okay. This says it returns the kth largest value. For example, the 5th largest number. Well, I want the largest. Here's one called max. So this is going to give me the largest number in a set of values. So that looks promising. So that's what I want. I want the largest number. So I say max, and then I need to tell it what numbers to look at. So again, I want it to look at these numbers. I select them, it puts it in there. Okay. You have to have that. Now, if I had a list of numbers just by itself, I could just type in every number. But in this case, I just tell it what range to look at, and it's going to come back and tell me that the largest number is 999. Okay, now we can do the same thing for the smallest number. Okay, now one other way you might find functions is look in categories. If you pull this down, you notice, okay, there's one that's all, it's going to list all the functions, but it also has them broken down. Financial functions, things dealing with date and time, math and trig, statistical, look up and reference, database, text, logical things, information engineering, cube and compatibility. So a lot of different types. So let's see what happens if we say, let's look at the math and trig. Okay, well, you notice here's a lot of things that you might recognize from trig. I can go down here and I don't see anything in the math and trig that looks promising. Let's look at statistical, because that often has to deal with things like this. And as I look down here, well, there's my max formula I had. Look down here, here's a min formula, the smallest number in a set of values. Okay. So I'm going to click OK, and it asks me again for where I want it to look. I want it to look among those numbers. Click OK. It says 25. Now again, notice that it ignored the blank cells. Okay, that's what you want it to do. Now if I put a 0 in one of those blank cells, now you notice this changes to 0 because now that's the smallest cell. If I delete that number, notice this goes back to 25. So these ignore blank and empty cells. So that might be a thing though. If I want to know how many cells are blank, again, you could just look down and see it, but if you have a long list, you might want to know how many blank cells. It might be, okay, how many students haven't taken a test, something like that. So let's look at our functions here. And you might say, okay, that sounds like a logical thing. Okay, well, I don't see anything there that looks promising. Let's just type in, it says type a description of what you want to do. So I'm going to just say blank. And look what I have here. Count blank counts the number of empty cells in a specified range of cells. That looks like what I want to do. So I'm going to do OK. In my range that I'm looking at, again, this list of cells, and notice it comes back with 3. And you can look at it. There are 3 blank cells there. If I put a number in here, then that changes because that cell isn't blank anymore. Okay, so we have 3 blank cells. Now, here's another type of function. How many names begin with the letter L? Okay. Again, you could just look at it and see, but if there's a lot of names, you don't want to have to do that. So here's where you want to find, this is going to get a little bit more complicated. Okay. We're talking about counting something. So counting is basically a statistical function. So I'm going to count something. Okay. And this just counts something in particular. But if I look down here, count if. Okay. This says counts the number of cells within a range that meet the given condition. And that's what I'm looking. I want to have a count. I want to know how many names begin with the letter L. So let's work with that. Okay, so first it comes up with the range. So again, there's my range. That's what I'm going to look at. Actually, that's not what I'm going to look at, okay, because I'm not looking at the numbers now, I'm looking at the names. So that's what I look at. Now the criteria. Okay. What do I want it to match? How many names begin with L? Well, it's going to be L, but not just L. Now here's what's important. Okay, there's something called a wildcard. This is in Excel. It's also used in a lot of other things. A wildcard is the asterisk. And that means, my closing quotation marks, that means that it's looking for any name that starts with the letter L and has any letters after it. 1 letter, 2 letters, 5 letters, 20 letters, whatever. It doesn't matter. That's what that asterisk means. It just means look for something that has an L at the beginning. So when I click OK, it tells me there's 1 name that begins with L. And if you glance down through there, you see, okay, here's the 1 name. Okay. If I were to say, okay, give me the names that begin with, how many names begin with S? If I correct that function and put S there, now you notice that it says 3. If I said, how many names begin with SH? I'll do this, SH, and then the wildcard. It's going to tell me there's only 1 name that begins with SH. So that's how you do a wildcard function. So that's how you do some of your statistical analysis. Okay, that's statistical things. Now, how about financial? A very common formula and something that you might use a lot is figuring out a monthly payment. If you borrow a certain amount of money at a certain interest rate for a certain amount of time, what is the monthly payment going to be? So let's look over here. Here's what I want. I want my monthly payment. Okay. So let's click our thing here, and I want to find a payment. And this says right here, PMT. Calculates the payment for a loan based on constant payments and a constant interest rate. So that sounds like what I want. Okay, so the first thing is, it asks me for the interest rate. Now notice this is interest rate per period for the loan. Okay, the period is a monthly payment, so period. But usually when you find out, when you learn about interest rates, are usually annual interest rates. Here's my interest rate. Okay, I just put in a 6. So remember our admonition that you should use cell references instead of hard numbers. And so that's what I'm going to do here, because I might want to change this. So I'm going to say that. However, that is not the interest rate. Okay, there's two problems with it. Interest rates are percentages. Well, 6 is a whole number. And if you remember your percentages, 6 is the same as 600%. 6% is 0.06. So what I want to do is take that number, whatever number I enter there, multiply it by, there's my multiplication, 0.01. Okay, so that's going to give me my 6%. But remember, that's an annual rate. For a monthly, you have to divide that by 12. So I'm going to put that in parentheses and divide by 12. So that's going to be the monthly interest rate. Okay? Now, NPR, the number of payments for the loan. Okay? I said that it's 3 years, but remember these are monthly payments. So instead of being 3 years, it's going to be however many years times 12, because there are 12 months in a year. Okay? PV, the present value. That means how much are you borrowing right now? Well, that's this amount right here. Okay, 5,000. So I just said L2. Okay? So these other two things here are optional, FV and type. So don't worry about those. If you click OK, you'll find that your monthly payment is $152.11. It's red and in parentheses because that's how accounting does for payments of loans. Okay? But you notice here, I could change this. Let's say instead of a 6% interest rate, I have a 9% interest rate. If I change that, notice my monthly payment just went up. If I borrow the money for 1 year, I have to pay it back in 1 year instead of 3 years. Now I'm going to have to pay $437.26 a month. If I borrow instead of $5,000, $10,000, here's my payment now. You see that by making these cell references, I can change a number here. It's going to change over there. If I have 5 years, there's my monthly payment. So that's how you use the PMT function, how you use a financial function. So this will be helpful for you in your next assignment.